Good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Fall. I'm an early on parent educator for Oakland County. I'm also an occupational therapist and an early interventionist for Waterford School District. I have 5 children of my own and have dealt with many, many temperaments. I also have 3 grandchildren. So I hope that my experience will be helpful to all of you. We're talking about a really interesting topic because it impacts our children and it impacts us as well. And so I hope that you will see yourself in parts of this presentation as well as your child. With that being said, I'm recording this for the Farmington Community Library, and I'm honored to be their speaker. Here we go. We're going to cover a variety of things tonight. We're going to talk about what temperament actually is. We're going to talk about 3 different categories of temperament, the 3 main categories. We're going to discuss something called goodness of fit. We will delve into the temperament differences in siblings, as well as some theories about sibling personality. We'll go deeper into the 9 traits of temperament. We'll talk about how to respond to behaviors, a child's behavior based on their temperament as well as our own. And then I will leave you with several references, my contact information, and a couple of resources that are really great tools to discover your temperament as well as your child's. So let's begin by talking about what is temperament. Temperament is displayed from infancy. If you think about a baby, you kind of get a feel of who they are right from the very beginning. Are they fussy? Are they easy to calm? Are they just sunny? Some of those things are apparent right from the beginning. It's influenced by biology, not by experiences. You're born with your temperament. You're wired a certain way. From your temperament, and your personality develops through experiences and interactions with other people, combined with the influence of your temperament. Temperament's not good or bad. It's just what it is. It's the way we're wired. It's our emotional and behavioral way of responding to the world around us. It's the way we approach the environment, the people in our environment, the things in our environment. And it's nothing that a parent chooses or influences. It's the way we are as we're born. This little quote just kind of explains it a little further. And I will read it. Typically I don't, but I will read this. It says, everyone feels and experiences things uniquely, based significantly on their temperament, and everyone's doing their best to react to and adapt to the demands of their environment. Recognizing and understanding your child's temperament as well as your own will help you to react to your child in ways that support and nurture their development and make life better for everyone. That's our goal. And hopefully this workshop will give you some tools to do that. So there's 3 main kinds of temperament. And I will refer to these as children, but all of us have a temperament. So think of yourself as well, or coworkers, or spouses, or partners. There's the easy and flexible kind of temperament. That's the majority of the population, believe it or not. There's the active or spirited temperament. I like to consider it intense. And then there's a slow to warm up and cautious temperament. Those, the second and third, are less common. Look at these darling faces and see if you can decide what kind of temperament these pictures represent. Easy or flexible, spirited or intense, cautious or slow to warm up. And if you predicted easy and flexible, you would be right. Look at how easily they are gazing out at their environment, how they're interacting with people. You really get a good feeling about that. So the easier flexible child tends to wake up cheerful, and cheerful is a relative term, but they tend to wake up and they're ready for the day to start. They can be active, they tolerate change, they like new people and situations. They also don't anger easily, but they aren't a patsy. They're not a pushover. They will stand up for themselves. They tend to be regular in their eating and sleeping habits, and they're pretty adaptable and calm. And we'll go into each of these areas as we move forward. The second group of pictures, let's look at them. Those little faces are pretty animated. You see both happy and not so happy faces. And these pictures represent children or people that are spirited or intense or feisty. I have several of those in my own family, and I might even be one of them myself. We might describe a child that is spirited or intense as strong-willed. or challenging. These children seem to have high moods and low moods, and they're very distinct. They're not just going along with the flow. They tend to have big emotions and appear to feel things more strongly, emotionally feel things more strongly. They can be impatient, they can be impulsive, they can be impatient with us as parents, they can be impatient with friends. Um, doesn't mean that they're not fun to be with, because they are. They're enthusiastic and they have highs and lows of mood that kind of go with whatever's happening, but they can be a lot of company. They also, interestingly enough, can be more sensitive than their peers, and that probably goes along with those highs and lows of mood and feeling things really deeply. These children tend to be more irregular in their sleeping and eating habits. And again, these are generalizations to describe this category of temperament. The third temperament, let's look at these little ones. They are darling, of course, but when you look at them, you might see that they appear a little reticent or a little shy. And these children are representing the slow to warm up or cautious child. These little ones have some physical attributes that you might not see in the other two categories. They tend to be more sensitive in terms of sensory input, loud noises, variations in temperature, the tag on their shirt, the feel of different food in their mouths. They might be the child that needs things to be the same for them to feel comfortable. They're also the little one that needs some generous transition time between activities. You may need to give them a heads up. We're going to be leaving in 10 minutes, or when the clock says this, or when the next commercial comes on, something to give them a guideline of when you're transitioning. These little guys, and really most little guys, do best with predictability, a routine they can count on, and calm interactions. That's very important, the calm interaction. They may be the little one that sits back and really gets the lay of the land before they join in an activity. It might be something even familiar, a family party, Thanksgiving at grandma's. It might be a play group, but they need to sit back, figure out what's going on, take it all in, and then approach that activity in their own way. They're the little ones that seem to be happiest if they can be near a parent or a caregiver. So think about those three general categories, the main categories of temperament, and kind of think where you fall potentially, as well as your child or children. More on the cautious, slow to warm up child. They're not risk takers. They also, this is interesting, this workshop was originally called Development and Temperament, because temperament does impact development, how a child develops motor skills, how they develop self-care skills, all those good things. The slow to warm up cautious child might hit those developmental milestones a little later than their peers because they're cautious, because they want to wait and see. Doesn't mean they won't hit them. They hit them in their own time. They could be fussy. Again, the regular sleeping and eating really helps them. And they're the child that becomes more positive about an activity or an environment or even a person as they have repeated exposures. They're the little ones that you might take to a play group and they're not sure the first time. The second time they might sit on the edge of the group. The third time they might start to wander into the group a little more. That repeated exposure is really helpful for the slow to warm up child. Again, let's think about where we see each other and ourselves. Are you easy and flexible? Are you less likely to want attention and to make your needs known, just kind of go along and get along? Are you spirited or feisty? You have big emotions and big reactions? Or are you slow and cautious and kind of want to wait and see in a new situation? You can be a combination of these things, certainly, but typically you lean more heavily toward one or the other. Why is it important that we understand temperament? If you know your child's temperament or have an idea about your child's temperament, you can understand their individual differences in a way that really works for them and works for you as a parent. You can help them learn how to express themselves, how to express their preferences, their wants, their needs, their observations in a way that feels natural and important to them. You can stop blaming yourself or your child for reactions that really aren't their fault. It's part of their temperament. I think of a parent who is enthusiastic and social and wants to be in the midst of all kinds of activities. They may have a child that's cautious and wants to sit back and can't understand that dichotomy of those two reactions and may blame themselves. What am I doing wrong that my child won't just jump in and play? By knowing your child's temperament, you can figure out ways for both of you to enjoy an activity, and you can support your child's development and growth. You can also learn to anticipate issues that might be frustrating. Think about a child that is active and wants to move a lot, having to sit for a while. Maybe they're at church, maybe they're on a car ride, maybe they're in some kind of a family gathering that requires a little more decorum. You can figure out ways to give them an opportunity to move outside of that activity so they can come back and sit in that activity, anticipating that issue and avoiding frustration on both your part and your child's part. It can also help you gauge how your child might act. You might not have those worries about, oh my gosh, I don't know how they'll behave in this playgroup. I don't know how they'll behave at grandma's house. You'll kind of have an idea. Oh, I know that they need a routine. I know that they need a lot of uh, warning before a transition. That can help in those situations. You can plan to provide experiences that enhance their abilities and support them um, by knowing their temperament. And you can also take comfort in the fact that understanding temperament and temperament itself is an ongoing lifelong process. It's an influence on our behavior, it's influence on everything we do, and it's how we entered the world. It's nothing we created as parents. Now let's talk about knowing our own temperament. If we know our own temperament, we can understand not only our child's developmental patterns, but we can help figure out ways that our temperament can best complement theirs. We can understand our own perspective as well as theirs and think about how situations might occur. And we can identify goodness of fit, which is the next thing we'll talk about. And goodness of fit refers to you and your child in terms of temperament. And there's our title, Goodness of Fit. It's kind of a fun thing to say. Goodness of fit really simply just refers to the compatibility between a child and an adult. Might be a caregiver, might be a grandparent, might be a parent. Think about your extended family, kind of think about their temperaments. It really is almost going down a rabbit hole as you start to go through your extended family or your friends at work or in any social group. It's really interesting to think about an adult's temperament and then watch them in a situation. Goodness of fit occurs when our expectations and choices as parents or caregivers match a child's temperament, their style and their abilities, not necessarily their personality, but their inherent temperament. Are they cautious? Are they the child that jumps right in? Are they the easygoing child that just goes with the flow? We can make different choices that mean success for the child and less stress for us as a parent. It doesn't mean we have to match with our child or children. It just means that we need to adjust our parenting style to meet that child's natural way of responding to the world. And I hope that that doesn't sound like we're giving in to a child. We're not. We are gauging our support of that child, our parenting choices based on success. We want the child to feel comfortable. We want to see successful uh, choices made for that child instead of having a combative situation. We want things to be smooth and happy. And by matching our child's temperament with our choice of parenting, we can achieve that. Not every day, not all the time. That would be really something, but this is something we can work toward. This is a really nice resource. It's from Vanderbilt University. And I'll show you in the next slide. This is a PDF that you can go on that URL and pull it up and print it or do it right online. It is a temperament continuum. And I want us to pull it up for just a sec and look at it. I know it's very small and I apologize. If you were to go onto the Vanderbilt site, you would be able to see it, of course, much more easily. It takes each of the 9 areas of temperament, activity level, distractibility, intensity, regularity, sensory threshold, approach and withdrawal, adaptability, persistence and mood, those 9 factors. And it puts them on a continuum, each thing. So, for example, an activity level, are you very active, wiggly and squirmy and difficulty sitting still, or are you not active? Sits quietly, prefers quiet, sedentary activities. You take your child or yourself and you plot them on each of those 9 factors. And then you take someone else. So you might take your child first and plot them. Are they active? Are they very distractible? Are they not so intense? And see where they seem to fall in the continuum, anywhere from one end to the other. It doesn't have to be A or B, it can be in the middle. And then you plot yourself. And that gives you some information about what your child's temperament is like, as well as your own, and where you mesh and where you might be a little different. So I urge you to take advantage of that resource. Vanderbilt puts out some really nice things, so you may find other things while you're there. So I know one of the big interests of the group is to talk about siblings and temperament differences. And so we'll do that now, and we'll depart a tiny bit from temperament into some theories about sibling differences. And I hope this will be really helpful to you. It's really super interesting to me. So excuse me if I kind of nerd out on some of these things. It's just amazing as far as I'm concerned. So siblings share genes and environments, so we expect them to have a moderate to significant level of similarity. But that's not what usually happens. I remember having my first child and then thinking, even though I kind of knew better because I'm a human in the world, that my second child would be just like him. And it certainly was not the case. Siblings are different because each sibling has their own temperament, and we know that that's inborn. And they also have their own behavioral style. We're kind of moving into a little bit of personality, the how of their behavior versus the what or why, if that makes sense. If you consider the how does your child express frustration? How do they express displeasure? Do they kick and scream and cry? Do they throw a tantrum? Do they whine? Do they just kind of accept things? That's the how. That's the important part for us to be able to think about when we think about behavior and temperament. And so you may have siblings that are diametrically opposed in terms of temperament. In some areas, they may be very similar in other areas. Again, that Vanderbilt continuum can be helpful. You can plot several children on that. But that being said, siblings typically are not the same in temperament. So think of your own children or your own siblings and think about how you are the same and different. Temperament influences how we behave toward people and objects and how we respond to them. And again, temperament is how we're wired. It's how we come out. It's how our biology and our genetics mesh and give us that temperament. Infant behavior, we talked about this briefly. It's really purely temperament. When you have a newborn, the first few weeks at home, an easygoing baby can be mild and happy. They're pleasant to care for, so it's easy to care for that baby and give them attention and give them affection, and they give it right back because they're an easy, mild baby. They're easy to have around. An intense or difficult baby might be challenging to calm. They might cry a lot. They might have big reactions to things that happen to them. This is especially interesting if your first baby or a different baby was very easygoing. The differences in temperament can cause a lot of stress to us as parents. And the interactions with that more difficult baby become more stressful. And it's just kind of a cycle, right? The easygoing baby is easy to care for and give affection to and pay attention to. The intense, difficult baby, before you even go in to interact with them, you're anxious because you know it's going to be a challenge. And of course, we love all babies, but babies have different temperaments, and it can be a challenge. The slow to warm up baby also may be a challenge for parents because they look very serious. They might even look solemn, and it takes a lot for them to react. And we might have to work really hard to engage with them, to get them to engage with us, I should say. And you may be a parent that has a big personality, and it might be hard to adopt that gentle, more quiet attitude toward a serious and solemn baby. Just things to think about. Think about your own babies when they were your own children when they were newborns. It's like I said, it's so interesting to think about all these different things. So there's three main theories for differences in siblings. We're kind of departing a tiny bit from temperament. We're talking about differences in siblings now, and this has a little more environmental factor, a little more family dynamic factor to it than the pure temperament. These are things that happen after a child is born, but temperament influences all of it. So the three main theories are divergence, environment, and exaggeration. And these are outside factors. They layer over temperament, like I said. Environment and people can impact differences in siblings, but at the very base is their temperament and how they relate to the world. Divergence is a Darwinian theory, and it emphasizes competition. And when we think of competition, we think of people competing against each other. In a family, it might be children competing for time and love and attention and affection from their parents. But the divergence part is that in this theory, we want to minimize competition. So if one child is an outstanding athlete, the other child, either consciously or unconsciously, might put their efforts toward academics because that way they've diverged and they're both the shining stars in the family. Rarely will it be, in this theory, head to head, two academics, two athletes. The idea is that people naturally diverge, whether they are conscious of it or not, so that their area of expertise is different from someone that is living with them, someone close to them. The second one is the environment. And we think about children are born into the same family with the same parents, often in the same house. But in reality, each child grows up in a different family because typically siblings, other than twins and triplets and other multiples, differ in age. And so the timing that each child goes through a family is different. We're different parents. We've had different experiences with the first child compared to the second or third. We might have had major life events that impact that first child differently than the second or third, depending on their age. We respond to different things as we go through life as parents and as children. But in this theory, the environment is essentially different because the family is different as each child comes along. And finally, the last one, this one was interesting to me, is the comparison and exaggeration theory. Think about your family, either your own family or the family that you grew up in. And this theory holds that families exaggerate even tiny differences between children. The example is that a family might have children who are all friendly. They're all nice kids. They're all friendly. They get along. They have friends. They do all kinds of things. But one of the children is an extrovert. So he is super sociable. He is out there and making friends and doing activities and all kinds of things. The family sees that child as the friendly, sociable child. The second child, who might be considered just as friendly and sociable in a different setting, is less extroverted. So he's called the introvert. Whether he's truly an introvert or not, in that setting, in that family, he's considered that. And that influences the choices that the child and the parent makes as their lives go on. So an extrovert in a family of friendly children is considered the epitome of friendliness. And that second child who in a different setting in school, I think of one of my own children who I always thought was kind of quiet. And I was hoping that he was speaking up in class and doing what he needed to do and contributing. And I remember going to a parent teacher conference. And I said, I worry about Quinn a little bit because I want to make sure that he's contributing and speaking up. And the teacher said, "You've got to be kidding me. That Quinn is talking all the time." So that was my interesting experience with comparison and exaggeration. And possibly he was quiet at home because he was number 4 with 3 older brothers that might have monopolized some of the conversation. I don't know. So, all that being said, we've talked about the 3 main types of temperament: easygoing, intense, and cautious. And we've talked about siblings and how things might impact them layered over their temperament. Now we're going to go a little deeper into those 9 traits of temperament. And with those, we'll also talk about some parenting choices we can make that support children in different parts of that continuum in each trait. So the 9 temperament traits, again, are activity level, distractibility, intensity, regularity or biological rhythms, sensory threshold or sensitivity, approachability, adaptability, persistence, and mood. And we'll go through each. First is activity level. So this one is pretty out there. We can understand this one immediately. It refers to how physically active someone is. I want you to think about yourself, even though I'm talking about children. You can certainly think about yourself or any other adult as well as your children. A child with a high activity level might move from activity to activity to activity. They need that constant movement. They might be a lot of company, being rowdy, disruptive, boisterous. They might have a challenge sitting still. A child with a low activity level seems to gravitate toward activities that are quieter and calmer. They might like sitting still. They might want to be in a quiet place, and they might not seem to have quite as much energy as their sibling or friend with a high activity level. As a parent, when you're dealing with children with different activity levels, the child who is more active, who has that high activity level, really benefits from frequent opportunities to move. And here's the example that we talked about a little earlier. If you're going on a long car trip, say grandma lives across state and it's going to be about 3 hours, you might stop in the middle at a rest stop and have a race or a game of tag or some kind of a really active, physically demanding activity so that that child can then return to the car and be more comfortable sitting. The child who is less active, especially less active in a busy family, might need parts of the day carved out for them to have quieter, slower activities. They will benefit from having that downtime, that quiet time. And it is a challenge when you have a child that's less active and you're a busy, busy family. And that's something to be conscious of. Carve out those times for those kids to have that time to nurture themselves with those slower, quieter activities, books, puzzles, blocks, things like that. Next is biological rhythms and regularity. And that just is how regular do you sleep, eat, use the bathroom, those kinds of things. A lot of this you can certainly, same with activity levels, see right away from a baby. Children who are regular in their biological rhythms like a routine, they stick to a routine, they like things to happen around the same time. Even their toileting functions tend to happen at around the same time. Their patterns are predictable and routine. A child who is irregular in their biological rhythms is the opposite. They're unpredictable in their biological functions. They don't eat, sleep, or use the bathroom on a regular schedule, and they don't seem to feel hungry or tired or have any other biological needs at the same time every day. And I know as an occupational therapist, I'm often recommending to parents to have predictable schedules. And that works really great for the child with regular biological rhythms. But for the child with irregular biological rhythms, it's not going to be the best advice. If you have a child that is highly regular, it's easy to set a predictable schedule and to stick with it. They like it to be regular. If a child is irregular, you may need to be more flexible in your routine. Maybe instead of saying it's time for nap at 1 o'clock, which would be right up the alley of a child who's highly regular, you might try to pick up their fatigue cues. And I know that goes against some of our ideas as parents, supporting that predictable routine in a family. But if a child is really irregular in their biological rhythms, we're hard pressed to change that. And so we may need to be the person that's flexible because they can't necessarily control what's going on biologically. Next is sensory threshold. Everything we receive in the world is sensory input. It's not just specialized sensory input that we impose on someone. Everything, the air, the ground, the plants, everything comes into us, and we have to filter it through a sensory lens. Children with a low sensory threshold don't need much input to meet their threshold. So they might just need a little bit. And when it goes beyond that low sensory threshold, they might be overwhelmed. They might react really strongly. Strong tastes and touches and temperature changes might cause them distress. They might react to something that no one else would even notice with a strong reaction, a little scratch, a noise that seems to be a background noise, those kinds of things that we might not notice, they will notice. They could be picky eaters because they are sensitive to temperature, taste, and texture, and they might have difficulty sleeping in a strange bed or even in a pack and play or a bed you bring along with yours when you travel in a hotel room or at grandma's house. Children with high sensory thresholds need a lot more input to meet that sensory threshold. And they may be constantly craving more input because they know their body knows that they need more to meet their threshold. They tend to not be bothered by small changes in the environment or sensory input or sounds and textures, things like that. That doesn't bother them. They might not even notice them. They might not react strongly when they're impacted by something in the environment, like they tripped and fell and scraped their knee. They might not even cry. They might not even notice it. They might be very open to trying new things like foods or activities, and they might be able to sleep just about anywhere. Now, of course, these are either end of that spectrum, either end of that continuum. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. If you've got a child that's sensitive to clothing, I'm sure some of you have been through this. You find things that they can tolerate. You find tag-free clothing. You find fabrics. And my advice would be buy multiples, as many as they can tolerate. If you find something that you tolerate, I should say, buy multiples so that you can make the day easier for them and for you. A highly sensitive child will need some time in a quiet place at a family gathering or some kind of a party. It might be the entryway or the coat room or something like that where they can retreat for a couple seconds and regroup. And also, these were children that are highly sensitive, but if you have a child that's got low sensitivity, check in with them frequently. They might be starting to feel ill. They might have something that's bothering them, and they may not be able to express that or even notice it because their sensory threshold hasn't been met yet. Intensity of reaction. This is one of my favorite ones. It refers to how powerfully or strongly we react to situations in our lives. Children that have high intensity reaction, big reactions, have powerful reactions. They have big emotions. They react strongly to something negative happening, even if we don't think it's that serious. Oh, your red cup's not available, but here's the blue one. Oh my gosh, that could be a really big problem. They might react strongly to positive things as well. They might be so excited and so happy. And sometimes that can be a challenge as well. Um, they're often called dramatic because they do have these big emotions and they make a big deal out of something that might not impact anyone else, but they're really not being dramatic. They're being true to their own intensity of reaction. Children that have a low intensity of reaction, and I'm sure you can almost write this yourself because they're opposites. They're on either end of the spectrum on that continuum. They react really mildly to positive and negative situations. And that can be a challenge as parents because you don't know, do they like it? Do they not like it? Kind of goes along with the child that is cautious. Their reactions can be very muted, and sometimes it doesn't even seem like they react at all, or they may react a few beats later. So patience is important with the child with low intensity reactions. If you have a child with high intensity reactions, again, talk about drama. They're not trying to be difficult or dramatic. They just feel things in a different way and they express them in a big way. So we can help kids understand this is a strong emotion. How can we express it in a way that seems appropriate for the situation? If your child has low intensity reactions, it's important to remember that they're still feeling things. We just might not see what they're feeling. You need to kind of be a detective and pick up on their cues and maybe talk to them and help them express how they're feeling because they may not be able to show it in the same way that a child with high intensity reactions shows their feelings. Adaptability refers to how easily we can change or adjust to change. Some children are highly adaptable, and those children are able to transition from one thing to another without much difficulty or protest. They can get up in the morning, have breakfast, go to playtime, then go on to ride in the car to drop brother off at school. They just go along. They're able to feel comfortable in a new situation relatively quickly. Children who are slow to adapt are suspicious of change. They are challenged from moving from one activity to the next. They need a lot of lead time to prepare for that change. They may be very unhappy when an activity is over, when you say to them, okay, it's time to move on, and may react that way. They may also be a child who cries or clings to mom or dad or caregiver when they're starting to approach a new activity. Maybe it's a new play group. Maybe it's story time at the library. Maybe it's just something as simple as a new park with a new playground. They may need to be close to someone they love so that they can feel comfortable adapting to a new situation or person. Adaptable children make our lives easier. They can move from one thing to another. Children who are slower to adapt are those guys that need a little more time. They need us to be understanding that change is hard for them. They're the child that you can give notice to. They're kids that really can benefit from some predictability and routine. Some children that are slow to adapt benefit from a picture schedule or some kind of a visual schedule to help them understand this is happening, then this is happening, then this is happening. Um, it's a little more uh, on us to add some predictability to their lives, but we'll all benefit from that. Next is approach and withdrawal, and this refers to how a child or a person initially responds or reacts to a new person or a new situation. Some children have a tendency to approach. That's one end of the continuum. Some have a tendency to withdraw, and that's the other end of the continuum. If you have a tendency to approach, those children are excited and they want to explore new places and meet new people and try new things. They might jump into a new environment without any hesitation, sometimes before you're even ready for them to do that. As soon as you open that car door, they're out on the playground. They might be very enthused about meeting new people or trying new things. And it takes them very little time to adjust to new people and situations. Whereas a child with a tendency to withdraw, probably more like our cautious child in those three main areas of temperament, is often described as slow to warm up. They need some extra time and preparation to adjust to new situations. They may be hesitant and resistant, might need several introductions to something new, and they might hang back and really get the lay of the land before they explore or join in. If you have a child with a tendency to approach and jump into things right away, that's probably an easier child to deal with in most situations. Not always. Sometimes their enthusiasm can get the best of a situation. Um, those children crave new ideas and new experiences and new environments and new places. So if you can provide them with some of that, they'll be really happy. Children with the tendency to withdraw need your support and time and understanding. They need some space. They need that quiet place to retreat to. They might need a lot of repeated exposure to something new before they feel comfortable with it. And again, all these things are on a continuum. There's not necessarily black and white. And all these things also are impacted by our own temperament as parents. So, two levels to think about. Persistence is how long you're able to stick with a task before giving up, even if the task is difficult. Some children have high persistence. They'll keep working on an activity, even if it's very challenging, and they won't show frustration. They'll work hard to get something finished. Once they've started it, they won't be able to give it up. And they'll practice something over and over and over until they master it at the level they want to master it. Children with low persistence might try an activity for a little bit, but once it becomes difficult, move on to something else. They may get frustrated when things are difficult. It may overwhelm them when an activity is difficult, and they might ask someone else, an adult or an older sibling, to do a task for them if it's hard for them. And again, it's not behavior necessarily, it's their temperament. If you have a child with high persistence, they can be really independent and they may work through a problem or stay with a situation longer than maybe they should. Um, you can check in with that child. You can offer help if you want. And I would be aware of how long they're working on something. You may need to encourage a break or two. If a child has low persistence and gives up easily on a task or quickly, they may just be becoming overwhelmed with a challenging task. So you can help them by helping them work through the emotions that they're feeling, because they may get teary or just exasperated or very frustrated with themselves. You can help them try some stress management techniques. I know a lot of families use deep breathing when a child becomes frustrated, and that can be really effective for a child with low persistence and a high frustration level. Distractibility, we all know what that is. It refers to how easily a person's distracted by things in their environment. Um, if a child has high distractibility, or a person, it could be you and I, they rapidly shift from one thing to another. They have their attention pulled away by something in the background, a noise, a smell, a door opening, those kinds of things. They may be really distracted by bodily functions. They might feel a little rumbling, they might feel a little hunger, and that distracts them. They can't work through that. They need to get something to eat. And they might have difficulty concentrating if even a little bit of discomfort is present. Maybe the fan is on a notch too high, or they can hear someone's conversation in the next room. A child with low distractibility can really be focused on a task, really stick with it, much like our persistent child. They can block out background noises. They can do what they need to do no matter what's going on in the world around them. And they can handle discomfort, such as a little bit of hunger, or if they're too warm, without being bothered. They can still stay with that task. They're truly absorbed in it. If you have a child that's really distractible, as an adult, as a parent, as a caregiver, we need to really help them attend to a task. It might be coming up with ideas on how to keep the environment calm and quiet, study carols, a special room where we study, a special place at the table where your activities can occur, tabletop activities. Children who are highly distractible aren't being intentionally difficult. They are just so captivated by anything that happens in their environment, and they're just attuned to noticing everything, and that distracts them from the task at hand. On the other hand, a child with low distractibility can sometimes be so focused on an activity that they can't move on until it's done. They can get upset if they can't accomplish what they want to accomplish in a set amount of time. As a parent, we need to help them figure out ways to get from A to B and maybe get from B to C later. Help them understand how they can break a task down and how it's okay to be frustrated and how we can work through that. Next is mood, which is an interesting thing to be included in temperament, because temperament impacts everything, but I was glad to see mood included. It refers to a person's tendency to be positive or negative, kind of that half full, half empty sort of situation for both parents and children. Children who are positive react in a positive way. of course, because that's what we're talking about. They are generally cheerful. They seem to be happy and bubbly, and that's how they're described by others. They tend to be that half full person. The glass is half full. They're optimistic, and they can become disappointed, but they seem to have an easier way to move on from disappointment. A child who is more serious, which is the way I tend to like to think of it, versus negative, but maybe they're that half empty person, the glass is half empty, they might appear more subdued. And we've talked about that in other of the 9 traits of temperament. They might be more subdued. It might not look like they are happy when they are happy. They might seem very calm, even solemn. We've talked about that as well. And they might not show their positive feelings, even if they're having positive, feelings. As a parent, a child who is uh, happy and positive in their mood is relatively easy to support. So these 3 points are more for the child who seems to be more serious. Um, you can accept that your child may not be outwardly happy all the time or even half the time. It doesn't mean they're not happy. It just means that they don't express it outwardly in the same way that maybe a typically happy child does or positive child does. You can reassure that child because people might say, "Are you okay? Are you happy?" You can reassure that child that however they express themselves and whatever they feel is okay. It's their feelings. And you can support them by teaching them some ways to express their emotions. There are so many books, and I'm sure Melanie has a whole list of them that we can access about mood and about emotions for every age. And those can be very helpful if you have a child that appears a little more serious most of the time. Here is another resource, and this one I absolutely love. It's from Georgetown University. There's 2 different instruments. One is for toddlers, one is for infants. Um, I encourage you to go to this website and poke around a little bit. It's a wealth of information. You can access these temperament resources. It's another temperament scale online and do it online. You can also download a PDF. And I'm going to just show you a couple examples of it so that you know what lies ahead if you access this Thrive Center. It's really, really an excellent resource. The whole website is. So this is called the Infant Toddler Temperament Tool. And there's our goodness of fit phrase. It talks about the 9 traits. This is the introduction. And when you get into the tool, there is a whole explanation of those 9 traits. Let's take activity level as our first one. We talked about that, high activity, low activity. And then they break it down in a way that I just love, the adult and the child. So a highly active adult may have difficulty sitting still. The child may be squirmy and active. The low activity adult sits back quietly and prefers sedentary activities. The child prefers less noise and movement. So they break it down to adult and child. And then the very best part, there's a scale that you can do online. I guess this is the second very best part for yourself and your child. And you can do multiple iterations of it yourself and different children. This is the very best part. That was the second best part. This is the very best part. So for each of the traits, they break it down. Here's activity level. I am highly active and my toddler's highly active. And then there's some things that you'll notice and things that you can implement for you and your child with a similar activity level. But they also go into I am less active and my child is highly active. You and your child have different activity levels, and they give you some tips for that. Same thing. I am highly active. My child's less active. I am less active, and my child is also less active. So they go through those 4 scenarios for each of the 9 temperament traits, and I think that's super valuable. And I hope that you will access that either on doing the quiz online or printing it and doing it as a PDF. Couple little things that I want to leave you with. Often our feelings toward our child have to do with parts of the child that we can't control. And temperament certainly is that. That's that inbred way they're wired. They're born with their temperament. If a child feels guilty, if a child is difficult, you may feel guilty that you're frustrated. This child's difficult. It's making parenting hard for me. I'm stressed. And you might feel guilty that you're frustrated with that child versus fulfilled as a parent, and that you're stressed rather than energized. And sometimes you wish your child was different. I'm sure I'm not the only parent that's been there. But through trial and error, as well as experience, and as well as resources, friends, neighbors, family, the library, certainly, early on, we can learn to accommodate and embrace our child's special characteristics, their differences, the things that are going to serve them well as adults, and I promise you they will. Um, that being said, when conflicts between you and your child, or just even you internally, become really difficult and they increase to a point where you're feeling helpless and hopeless, assistance can be helpful and welcome. And I encourage you to talk with a therapist, to talk with your child's pediatrician. If you feel like some of your differences are so challenging that you need some outside help with them, please access it. It's very successful. There's many resources that can help you. You're doing a great job, and asking for help is a wonderful thing. And finally, letting your schedule and expectations vary to meet your child's natural temperament can prevent conflict and stress. You're not giving in, you are parenting the child the way they need to be parented. And it can allow your child to have their needs met in a way that plays to their strengths and builds on their natural temperament. And it can make things better for everyone. Here are some sources that I used. That Thrive Center, that's the Georgetown University one. Penn State has some nice things. Australia has some amazing things. I encourage you to look at that. Also, Maui Family Magazine, I found some really good things there. Of course, Michigan State Extension, Go Spartans. NPR, Urban Child Institute is also very helpful. 0 to 3 is super helpful, and so is Vanderbilt University. That was the first chart we used. Here is my name, my contact information, and I thank you so much for your kind attention. I hope that you found this as interesting as I did as I presented it. Let's think about our temperament and how that impacts our lives and the lives of our children. Thank you for being here.